All right, in this video I'm going to show how I generate I call it an aesthetic plane. You can see I've got that here in Blue Sky Plan. The reason I use this is for setting teeth. So as part of full arch cases, I'm always doing a 2D simulation, figuring out an ideal smile. I'm always doing a facial analysis from their facial pictures. And so, from those 2D images, I will have an idea of where I want to put things. The challenge becomes translating that into 3D. So if based on your pictures you can generate some kind of a plane like this, now it tells you exactly where to drop your teeth into when you pull this into the software of your choice, Blue Sky, Exocad, 3Shape, whatever. And you can see this case is challenging because this is not just a normal mandible where you could kind of guess and be in the ballpark. I have to set a full arch of lower teeth, and I have to set it against a maxilla which only has some anterior teeth present. And so I don't want, these posterior teeth to be way low or way high, so that when Danny Doming, who's doing the surgery and restorative here, when he goes and makes the upper teeth, I want it to actually be in the proper position. So let's show how I do that. I went ahead and exported the maxilla and the mandible as well as the teeth. Now here I didn't have an upper intraoral scan. That's okay. I can do this and be pretty darn close based on just the teeth from these segmentations. But I exported this model, or all of these models here. And so let's go and now open those in Mesh Mixer. Okay, and here you can see it. Again, this was just purely exported from Blue Sky Plan, all as one model, and opened up in Mesh Mixer. And Mesh Mixer is where I'm going to generate those planes. So for starters, I don't even have to look at the pictures just yet. I'm just going to generate the plane. So if you come up here to Mesh Mix, you can click on one of these cubes. So these are under primitive shapes, and this is just purely a cube. All right. Now I'll make this skinnier, and as I do that, you see it's changing dimensions here. I want to make this real thin, like 0.3 millimeters thick. Okay. Let me undo that. Because I had uniform scaling on, it made the whole thing scale down to that same degree. So when I turn that off, now I only have changed that dimension to 0.3. All right, and I'm just going to pull it over here in the neighborhood and get it approximated. I don't have to do anything real close just yet. So now with that done, let's just hide that for a moment. I've got this shape. It's a plane. I'll use that one as the midline. So let's go to Edit, Duplicate. All right, so there's another one there. It's just buried up under this. So if I hit T for transform, this is a new STL. I'm just going to rotate this thing 90 degrees. Okay. And I could try to, ballpark it, or I could just come up here and I can see that as I rotate this, that's the number that's changing. Let's just rotate it 90 degrees so that this is perfectly perpendicular to the model I had already generated. I'll accept that, and in most cases, if I want to maintain that symmetry, I will just join these two together. So now those are combined. They're one STL. I could even give them the same face group color. And now I need to align it, okay, because clearly that's not a good occlusal plane. And I can hit transform and just, eyeball this, but let's try to do it a little bit more precisely. So let's go into PowerPoint, and this is just a simple PowerPoint analysis that I've done. I've got the identity hidden, but this is, the yellow line is going right through her interpupillary line, and then that's duplicated and pulled down here. Based on aesthetics, I am thinking that the incisal edge needs to come down. So I'll probably add a couple of millimeters to the anterior teeth here, and I can see these teeth back here, which are kind of super erupted. I would like to just maybe keep the plane right on those and orient this where the the upper anteriors are kind of on that same plane. All right. I can also tell here, based on this, that this is her facial midline, right? I'm going directly through the bridge of her nose and then right through the philtrum of her upper lip. So based on this, this is what I'm going to have in my mind, and I can reference back and forth as I'm trying to set this plane. I want my horizontal component to be going here and the vertical component going here. All right, so let's jump back into Mesh Mixer. I'm seeing this is maybe a millimeter into tooth number 8. All right, so let's do that. And lo and behold, I'm pretty darn close. I'm about right there. Now, as I'm at that, I want to orient it this way, okay? So, again, I wanted to lengthen those anterior teeth by a millimeter or two. And when I look at it from the side, I'm considering that occlusal plane, okay? So here, that looks pretty good. Maybe not quite as much there. All right. So because these were joined together and they're perpendicular to one another, I have really quickly generated this plane so that now when I go into Blue Sky Plan and I start setting teeth, I don't have to guess. I can more or less just drop those teeth right onto this plane, okay? And I'll usually do that for positioning teeth as a whole. And then if I have to set to an existing opposing dentition, I'll tweak it from there. I'll individually move some teeth around. So let's just do this. I'm going to export this shape I've generated. And I'll call this Aesthetic Plane. All right, that's been saved, and now I just bring it into Blue Sky Plan. So import an STL. And there's that aesthetic plane. Okay, because I built this based on the models which were just pulled straight out of Blue Sky Plan. Because it was oriented to that, there's no need to stitch here. So when this pops up, I don't need to stitch this. I will just delete it, or I'm sorry, hit the X, and that's going to be already in the correct orientation. Okay, now I've already done this, but I'm going to just show it to you by way of just trying to show the principle. When I'm ready to set teeth now, I'm going to go over here to denture module. I'm not doing a denture per se, but the denture module is the quickest and easiest way to drop in a bunch of teeth very quickly, because I can go up here and choose an entire arch of lower teeth that are already pretty well set in occlusion and relative position to one another. So let's go with this Mitchhurst flat anatomy library, and let's just select all those mandibular teeth and bring them in and just hold shift, drop them into place. All right, so just to drive the point home, let's just turn all this stuff off, and I can set these teeth now with total disregard for any of that stuff, because all I'm doing is setting it to a plane. All right, I'll pull this back, and remember this is set to a facial midline, so I will position this where it's right between number 24 and 25. Okay, I'll pull that up, and then again consider this like a flat plane of occlusion, like you would have for setting dentures on a flat plane. So posteriors need to rotate up a little. This does have a bit of a curve of spee, so it won't be perfectly on that plane. But right there, I know I'm pretty symmetric by how much teeth I can see, and I've got the midline set exactly. So really at this point, my tooth setup is mostly done. All right, let's just turn back on the maxilla and the maxillary teeth. All I need to know now is just how far back to bring these. Okay, so I'm going to give her a little bit of incisal overbite and overjet, right? And just slightly bring that down. Again, not changing where I've set the midline to. Now the only other question is, am I going to be centered over the ridge? So let's hide this plane now, because the plane has done its job. Okay, and I'm going to look from here. So usually I would, if I'm thinking of setting a full arch of teeth, I'm thinking mandibular stability, I want teeth centered over the ridge. Here, her mandible is crazy, right? It's actually a fibula that was reconstructed because she had a tumor removed, or had her whole mandible removed because of a tumor. And so, in this case, what I would probably do instead is just think about setting it to an ideal maxillary arch of teeth. So I see that it's pretty good on the anterior canine to canine. I'd like to maybe rotate out both arches laterally to get it more centered around her maxillary ridge. So I could turn on the tooth chain. All right. And here I'm going to just lock this at the lateral incisors, and I can hold shift and swing this whole thing out laterally, like so, and like so. All right. And then I could lock the canines and maybe bring this slightly back in. Okay. That one I like, so I'm going to lock now at that tooth. So I'm just kind of generating this arch form based on the maxillary arch. And again, I would normally do this on the mandibular arch, especially for a complete denture where, stability is going to be determined by those teeth sitting atop the ridge. Okay, right there. And I'd like to kind of visualize how far back her arch is, because one thing I haven't accounted for is the tooth scaling. All right, and so I'm thinking first premolar, first molar, with this tooth residing right there in the mesiobuccal cusp, and really I don't think I need to change the scaling. Okay, so there we go. That's my entire setup. So now I can begin planning implants based on that. So I'm going to delete these because I had already done this previously via the exact same method I just showed you. And so now the tooth setup's been done. Let's go back into surgical guide mode. Okay, and I'll turn on the pre-existing aesthetic plane that I had generated, and you can see my mandibular tooth setup. Right. So as I'm now planning these mandibular implants, I can do so with a prosthetic endpoint in mind. I'm not guessing. I'm not just sticking implants in at any old angle where the bone is, right? I mean, you could do that, and then you got enough space here. You could do angled multis, but why on earth would you complicate your life adding in angled multi-unit abutments and getting poor biomechanical positions when you can just know it, right? So if we turn on the mandible and hide these, you can now see my mandibular implant positions, and it'll be more evident when I turn on these abutments. Okay, that plane has kind of done its job. I don't need it anymore. I'm just visualizing the teeth positions. So it makes a big difference. Now I don't worry about ending up with a facial screw access hole because I'm sticking out this way. When Danny does this surgery, he's going to go in and it's a fibula, right? So it doesn't have any of the normal anatomic landmarks that would lead him to know that he needs to position this right here. Rather, the guide is going to control all that, and it's all been predetermined by a prosthetic wax up, let's say digital wax up. So we're not going to have to use any angled multi-unit abutments. We're going to be emerging right through the center of occlusal surfaces, and then in the case of the anterior teeth, we're going to be at least lingual to incisal edges. That is our goal here. Okay, and you could look at any one of these individual positions and see how that's been accounted for. All right, so we're coming lingual to incisal edges here. So just a very simple way. I do this on the vast majority of full arch cases I do. On a mandible, typically it's not as critical because you kind of set the mandible based on the maxillary teeth. It's setting the maxillary teeth normally that I find this so valuable, because again, translating my ideal of what I've accomplished in 2D based on facial aesthetics, setting that maxillary arch at the right position is the critical step. And if I can do that, now setting them to the mandibular arch normally would be much easier. Here, we're not doing the maxillary arch. It's just so hard because this is a fibula, not a mandible. so all the anatomic landmarks are gone. So anyway, this aesthetic plane is a really valuable tool that you can use, and it's incredibly easy. You know, this is now a shape that is pre-saved if you choose to save it, right? So I wouldn't even have to go back into Mesh Mixer. I have a folder in my documents that I have called Corey STL files, and it's just a bunch of random useful STL files that I use repeatedly. So, you know, say next case I'm doing this and it's a different person, the plane's set differently to them, but I can just import that same plane that I've got pre-saved. Don't worry about stitching it, right? Now it will be off in one direction or another, but I can sit here, I can tweak this, and I can set it now to any given patient. And I just sit there and do that based on, again, 2D pictures where I'm analyzing the facial pictures. And in a maxillary arch, I'm doing that based on a 2D simulation. And so here's an example of that, right? I'm doing a 2D simulation, this patient's existing dentition. This was the simulation where things got set to ideal. It's approved by the patient. And if I was in my simulation software, which I prefer to use this one called DTS Pro, right? This software is very valuable because I can do this translucency, right? I can look at this and say, okay, there's the ideal teeth, but as I'm trying to do my 3D wax up, I can zoom in here and see, okay, his existing tooth is right there, but based on what we've decided is ideal, I can see I need to add 1.5 millimeters of length here, 2 millimeters on that one. This one, you know, about 3 millimeters, and so forth. And it just makes it so easy to go back and forth and generate your ideal 3D wax up without guesswork. It's just very precise. So I hope you found that helpful.